The sun was just beginning to rise over the airbase, casting long, pale streaks of light across the tarmac. The roar of engines echoed faintly in the distance, a steady rhythm that reminded everyone that life on a military base never truly paused. Amid the controlled chaos, new faces appeared and old routines unfolded, but no one expected that today would be anything other than ordinary. That's when she stepped onto the base. Quiet, unassuming, her presence almost invisible among the bustling personnel. Everyone noticed her, though they wouldn't admit it out loud. There was something about her, a kind of silent confidence that couldn't be ignored, something that drew the eye without effort. Welcome back to United War, where we uncover the most incredible untold military stories, the moments that shock even the most seasoned warriors. Today, you're about to hear the story of a woman who walked onto a base and changed the atmosphere with nothing but her presence. A woman who, when challenged, flipped the world of the Navy and the SEALs on its head. It all began with one simple act, the Admiral's misjudgment. Admiral Thompson was known for his strict rules and rigid expectations, a man who commanded respect simply by walking into a room, whose word carried the weight of decades of experience in the Navy and the Air Force. He had dealt with countless pilots, officers, and enlisted personnel over the years, and in his mind, he knew how to size people up at a glance. When he first saw her, standing at the edge of the runway with nothing but a flight jacket and a duffel bag, he assumed she was just another transfer, another name on a long list of people passing through his command. "Who's this?" he muttered to the lieutenant beside him, his voice low but carrying an edge. The lieutenant shrugged. "New transfer, sir. F-22 program, I think." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Something about the way she stood, calm, composed, unbothered, annoyed him. It was as if she were challenging his authority without saying a word. And he didn't like it, not one bit. Moments later, he called her over. "Step forward," he barked. His tone left no room for hesitation. She complied immediately, walking across the tarmac with an effortless poise, her boots making soft, precise sounds against the concrete. Every other person on the base seemed to pause and watch. The slightest movement, the way she held her head, the calm in her gaze, it was unnerving to some and awe-inspiring to others. "Who do you think you are?" the Admiral snapped, stopping in front of her. His expression was a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "This is my base. I don't tolerate nonsense, and I certainly don't tolerate people who think they're special." She tilted her head slightly, but did not flinch. Her voice was calm, measured, yet carried an authority that made even him take a small step back. "Sir, I am here to complete my assignment and follow all protocols. I do not seek to disrupt anything." The Admiral's eyebrows shot up. "Assignment? Protocol? You're new here. You haven't proven anything. I could throw you off this base right now and no one would bat an eye." The words were meant to intimidate, but they had the opposite effect. She simply looked him in the eye, steady, unwavering, and replied with a quiet confidence that made the room feel smaller, the air heavier. "If that is your decision, sir, I will comply." The officers around the tarmac exchanged glances. They had never seen a reaction like that. Most people, when faced with an admiral's wrath, would stammer, shift nervously, or retreat. Not her. She stood still, composed, unshaken. And that composure sparked something in the onlookers. A whisper of curiosity, a spark of intrigue. Moments later, the admiral's patience snapped. "That's it. Off the base, right now." His hand motioned dismissively toward the exit gate, expecting her to turn and walk away in obedience. The air seemed to shift as she nodded once and started walking toward the gate. But not hurriedly, not flustered. She walked as if she owned every step she took, and, though no one dared to speak, every person watching sensed the difference. It was then, just as she reached the edge of the tarmac, that the moment arrived that would forever change the way this base remembered her. From a distance, a radio crackled, faint at first, then sharp, a call sign over the F-22 comms. "Viper 9, report in." She paused, almost imperceptibly. Then she spoke, and her voice carried with a calm authority that demanded attention. "Viper 9, ready for mission." Immediately, every SEAL on the base stopped in their tracks. They recognized the call sign instantly. It wasn't just any code. It belonged to a pilot with a reputation for precision, for lethal effectiveness, a name whispered across the most classified operations. And as her voice carried, every SEAL instinctively stood at attention, their bodies rigid with respect, hands coming up in salutes that spoke volumes about what they knew and what they didn't yet fully understand. The Admiral froze, his eyes widened, his hand, mid-gesture dismissing her, dropped slowly to his side. He stared at her as the SEALs continued saluting, the sound of boots hitting the ground in sync with their crisp movements, the weight of their respect palpable. He had underestimated her, completely. Every assumption he had made, the idea that she was just another transfer, another rookie to intimidate, crumbled in an instant. For a long moment, silence fell over the tarmac. Not the awkward silence of hesitation, but the heavy, commanding silence of recognition. The kind that only occurs when someone with true authority appears unexpectedly. The kind of recognition that cannot be faked, cannot be challenged, and cannot be ignored. And in that silence, the Admiral realized that he had not just been wrong, he had been on the verge of committing a serious mistake. One wrong command could have had consequences he wasn't ready to face. She wasn't just a pilot. She wasn't just a new face. She was a legend in the making, and in that instant, the entire base understood it. The story of the Admiral throwing her off the base would have been an embarrassing anecdote for him under any other circumstances. But when her call sign echoed across the runway, commanding respect from the SEALs, it became a defining moment, one that would be remembered long after her mission was complete. A story passed down in whispers and awe across every deck, hangar, and barracks of the base. And that was just the beginning. Because Viper 9 had not yet taken off. Her missions, her skills, and the respect she commanded were only the opening chapter of a story that would unfold in ways no one on the base could ever have predicted. The Admiral, the officers, the SEALs, they had all witnessed the first hint of something extraordinary, and they would soon learn that respecting her was not a choice. It was survival. The tension on the tarmac didn't ease after the SEALs' salutes. In fact, it thickened, wrapping around everyone like an invisible storm. Admiral Thompson remained frozen for a long moment, staring at Viper 9. Every instinct in his decades of experience screamed that this was no ordinary pilot. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again, as if trying to find words that wouldn't come. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight, cautious, and uncharacteristically uncertain. "Viper 9, you're cleared to remain on base, but know this: any disruption, any breach of protocol, and I will personally see that you are removed. Understood?" Viper 9 nodded, expression calm, unwavering. "Understood, sir," she said. Her voice carried the weight of confidence, not arrogance, and it immediately reminded everyone present why the SEALs had saluted her. As she walked toward the hangar, officers whispered among themselves. Some were impressed, others were skeptical. But one thing was undeniable. She had changed the dynamic on the base. People who had felt secure in their hierarchy now felt something new: uncertainty. Inside the hangar, the roar of engines and the metallic scent of aviation fuel created a familiar backdrop. Viper 9 approached her jet, inspecting it with practiced eyes. Every panel, every gauge, every lever was examined with precision.
The routine was second nature, yet it held the weight of someone who had spent countless hours in the air, in combat zones, and in situations where split-second decisions meant life or death. Lieutenant Marks, her assigned wingman, approached cautiously. "Ma'am," he began, hesitating, "the SEALs are still talking about your call sign. They've never—" Viper 9 cut him off with a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Leave them be. Respect is earned, not asked for." Her tone was gentle, but it carried authority. Marks nodded, sensing immediately that she wasn't just giving advice, she was demonstrating the difference between leadership and mere rank. Meanwhile, back on the tarmac, Admiral Thompson convened an emergency briefing. Officers crowded into the command center, whispering about what had just happened. The notion that a single pilot could command the respect of elite SEALs was unprecedented. The room smelled faintly of coffee and tension as the Admiral began to speak. "Everyone needs to understand," he said, voice stronger now, but still wary. "Viper 9 is not just a pilot. She has a record that exceeds most of our field operatives. She has completed missions that, until now, were classified at levels even I couldn't access." Gasps circulated through the room. A few junior officers glanced at one another nervously, wondering if they had underestimated her. Even those who had trained under her, in a sense, had only seen the tip of the iceberg. Across the base, Viper 9 prepared for her first sortie. The hangar doors opened to reveal the bright morning sky, streaked with the golden hues of dawn. As she climbed into the cockpit of her F-22, every movement precise and deliberate, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was more than flying. This was proving once again that no one, no admiral, no commander, no doubter, could dictate her capabilities. The jet's canopy closed with a hiss, sealing her in a cocoon of technology, training, and instinct. Systems came alive under her fingertips. Displays glowed with data on enemy positions, flight vectors, and mission parameters. She ran through her checks, mentally rehearsing maneuvers, anticipating threats, and preparing for the unexpected. Below her, the SEALs watched. Some leaned against vehicles, others stood at rigid attention. Every movement she made, every check she performed reflected the same calm command they had seen when she first walked onto the base. And the memory of their salutes earlier in the morning reminded them that this was no ordinary flight. In the control tower, radar operators monitored her ascent. The screen flickered with the first signs of her takeoff, the jet lifting gracefully, slicing through the air with a quiet but unmistakable power. Commander Harris, watching the display, muttered under his breath, "She's not just a pilot, she's a force of nature." High above, Viper 9 entered the designated airspace. The sun reflected off her jet's surface, dazzling and almost symbolic, as though announcing her presence to anyone foolish enough to underestimate her. She engaged in routine drills at first, sharp turns, rapid ascents, and evasive maneuvers, but always with the underlying focus that suggested readiness for anything. Then the simulation changed. Unexpected targets appeared on her radar, unmapped, unidentified, and potentially hostile. Her eyes narrowed, fingers dancing across controls with fluid precision. In that moment, the legend of Viper 9 transformed into proof. The call sign wasn't just respected, it was feared and revered. Every decision she made, every adjustment mid-flight, demonstrated not just skill, but a mastery of combat that few could rival. Meanwhile, the base below held its collective breath. The SEALs tracked her progress via live feed, their earlier salute now understood not as ceremony, but as acknowledgement of real, lethal expertise. Officers in the tower scribbled notes, recognizing that this pilot wasn't merely executing commands, she was redefining the limits of what a single operative could accomplish. As Viper 9 completed her first loop over the base and prepared to return, her movements were flawless, her landing precise. She taxied back to the hangar without a single hesitation. The jet came to a smooth stop, and the canopy lifted, releasing her once more into the world of ordinary uniforms and nervous admirals. But nothing about this sortie was ordinary. Every glance she received carried silent acknowledgement. Every whisper across the base reinforced a simple truth. Viper 9 was not just part of the military machinery. She was its heartbeat in moments of uncertainty, the edge that could tip the balance of life and death, respect and fear, order and chaos. Admiral Thompson watched from a distance, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. His earlier assumptions had been shattered. He knew, deep down, that the morning's events were just the beginning. And as Viper 9 stepped out of the cockpit, brushing her hair from her face and moving with effortless authority, he realized something he hadn't before. Underestimating her could be catastrophic, not just for him, but for anyone who dared to doubt the name behind the call sign. And that was only part of the story, because the real mission, the one that would cement Viper 9's legend among the SEALs, the admirals, and the world above the clouds, was only just beginning.
The hangar was quieter now, the morning bustle replaced by the low hum of engines winding down and mechanics discussing routine maintenance. But the tension from earlier still lingered, like a shadow. Viper 9 didn't need to speak to command the room. Her very presence, her calm, deliberate movements, held the attention of everyone nearby. Every officer, every enlisted member, seemed to sense the weight behind her eyes. They weren't just watching a pilot. They were witnessing the embodiment of experience, precision, and authority. As she removed her helmet, the tight, controlled calm she had maintained for the flight softened just slightly. For a fleeting moment, her jaw relaxed. Her eyes reflected fatigue that had accumulated from years of missions too dangerous, too secret for the general public to know. Yet there was no fear, no uncertainty, only a readiness that made anyone who looked at her realize that this woman had survived far more than any of them could imagine. Lieutenant Marks, still observing from a distance, finally approached. "Ma'am, the SEALs, when you called in, they saluted. Every single one. I've never seen that before. Not even for our top commanders." Viper 9 gave a faint nod, accepting the statement without comment. "It's not about respect for me. It's about recognizing competence. They know what competence looks like. And so should you." Her words, simple as they were, carried a sting. Many officers bristled, aware that their confidence in authority had been subtly challenged. But that was the point. Viper 9 didn't seek to intimidate. She sought only to ensure that the truth was acknowledged. The truth that actions, not rank, defined respect in moments of life and death. The unexpected mission briefing. No sooner had she started to remove her gear than a commotion at the command tower drew attention. The base's operations officer, sweating slightly, hurried toward her with a tablet in hand. "Ma'am, we've received intel. Multiple unidentified aircraft entering restricted airspace. Recon suggests hostile intent. We need Viper 9 to intercept." Even before she could respond, her instincts kicked in. This was no simulation. The adrenaline that comes with imminent danger surged, and her focus sharpened like the edge of a finely honed blade. Without hesitation, she grabbed her flight suit, checked her helmet, and moved toward the jet bay with the kind of fluid efficiency that came only from countless hours of training under the most extreme conditions. Admiral Thompson, watching from the observation deck, found himself torn. He wanted to stop her, to assert his command, but deep inside he knew she was the best chance of neutralizing the threat. The SEALs, stationed strategically across the base,
exchanged looks that mirrored the Admiral's mixed feelings, fear and respect entwined, anticipation and dread coexisting in every heartbeat. The intercept. The F-22 roared off the runway, rising into the morning sky with unparalleled speed and grace. The wind whipped past her canopy as Viper 9 engaged the systems, scanning rapidly for enemy contacts. Radar blips appeared, some erratic, some calculated. She analyzed, calculated, and maneuvered with a precision that left even seasoned analysts on the ground speechless. A formation of unknown aircraft moved in tight synchronization, attempting to outmaneuver one another while probing for weaknesses. But Viper 9 was faster, smarter, and more precise. Every movement she made was the culmination of years of training, experience, and a discipline that bordered on instinct. Her weapon systems locked onto multiple targets simultaneously. She calculated distances, trajectories, wind resistance, and threat potential in milliseconds. Below, SEAL teams monitored her progress via live feed. They whispered to one another, partly in awe, partly in disbelief. "That's unreal," one murmured. "She's taking them all down before they even realize she's here." And indeed, in a blur of tactical brilliance, Viper 9 neutralized the first wave of enemy aircraft with surgical precision. Missile locks, evasive maneuvers, countermeasures, all executed seamlessly. Each engagement reinforced the legend that the SEALs had already saluted. This pilot was not just exceptional, she was unstoppable. The moment of recognition. Back at the base, the scene was tense but quiet. The SEALs remained standing, eyes fixed on the screens tracking Viper 9's every movement. Officers scribbled frantic notes, some trying to log performance data, others simply absorbing the reality of what they were witnessing. Admiral Thompson's face had changed. Gone was the arrogance, replaced with something closer to humility. He realized finally that his earlier misjudgment had been monumental. This wasn't just a skilled pilot. This was the strategic force multiplier. Someone whose abilities alone could alter the outcome of a mission, protect lives, and even prevent a disaster on a scale he hadn't considered. When the F-22 reappeared on radar, Viper 9 descending from the sky with flawless precision, she didn't just land. She landed in a statement. A perfect roll onto the runway, brakes applied at exactly the right moment, canopy lifted, and she stepped out, calm, collected, untouchable in her demeanor. Every officer, every SEAL, every enlisted member present instinctively straightened. Some saluted, others simply stood at attention. And for the second time that morning, a room full of military personnel had their assumptions shattered. The Admiral, now staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief, finally understood. Her call sign was more than a designation. It was a symbol, a warning, a recognition that rank could not substitute for skill, courage, or experience. And in that moment, everyone realized that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. The seed of the mission ahead. As Viper 9 walked toward the command center, she exuded a quiet intensity that left no doubt she had arrived for more than a single flight. Every step suggested that the next challenge was not simply airborne engagement, but strategy, coordination, and command. Officers whispered among themselves, some skeptical, some inspired, but one thought united them all. This was the beginning of a story that would define the base, the SEALs, and the entire chain of command for years to come. And in that quiet moment, above the roar of engines, and beneath the clear morning sky, Viper 9 knew the real work was only starting. She wasn't just here to prove herself. She was here to change the game, to command respect the only way it mattered, through action, precision, and undeniable skill. The command center was alive with the quiet hum of activity, but every eye followed Viper 9 as she entered. Officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some straightening involuntarily, others stealing glances at her with a mix of awe and uncertainty. Admiral Thompson, usually the embodiment of authority, remained seated, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if bracing himself for something he didn't fully understand. Viper 9 approached the briefing console, her movements smooth, deliberate, yet commanding. She placed a hand on the console and reviewed incoming intel with the same cold precision that had defined her flight. Enemy activity, previously underestimated, had escalated, and her experience immediately identified the patterns that most of the officers had missed. "Sir," she began, her voice cutting through the low murmur in the room, "we have multiple threats approaching from two vectors. I've calculated the optimal intercept trajectories and engagement strategies. Casualties can be minimized if executed as planned." The Admiral looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. This wasn't just strategy, this was foresight, an almost preternatural understanding of the battlefield, delivered calmly, confidently, without ego. Lieutenant Marks leaned slightly toward one of the SEAL observers, whispering, "This is why they salute her. That isn't just skill, that's instinct, experience, it's almost uncanny." Viper 9 continued, laying out the plan with precision. Every SEAL, every officer, every enlisted member could see the brilliance behind her calculations. Her strategies weren't theoretical, they were battle-tested. She anticipated every possible move the enemy could make, every countermeasure, every contingency. By the time she finished speaking, the room was silent except for the hum of the equipment and the occasional scribble of notes. Admiral Thompson finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual, tinged with respect he had not felt before. "Execute your plan, Viper 9. Full authority granted." The decision sent ripples across the room. Orders were relayed, SEAL teams mobilized, and support aircraft scrambled. Every movement carried urgency, but with a disciplined precision that reflected the confidence instilled by Viper 9's leadership. Within minutes, the F-22s launched. Viper 9 led the formation, her jets slicing through the sky with calculated grace. The enemy targets appeared on radar, and in a coordinated strike, she neutralized the first wave with lethal efficiency. Her movements were a combination of instinct and calculation, a seamless integration of pilot skill and battlefield strategy. On the ground, SEAL teams watched via live feeds, salutes maintained even as they coordinated supporting fire. This was more than admiration. It was acknowledgement of an operative who had earned her place at the highest level of command through action, precision, and courage. Back in the command center, Admiral Thompson felt a wave of humility. He had misjudged her earlier, underestimated her abilities, and almost allowed protocol to blind him to talent. The room had witnessed a lesson in leadership that no manual could teach. Respect comes from mastery, from capability, from earned trust, not just from rank alone. As the mission concluded successfully, Viper 9 returned to the base. She landed flawlessly, the jet touching down as though guided by invisible hands. The engines powered down, but the impact of her presence lingered. Every officer, every SEAL, and every member of the base had witnessed something extraordinary. When she stepped from the cockpit, the salutes were instinctive, not because she demanded them, but because she had proven herself beyond question. Even the Admiral, standing slightly apart, could not hide his respect. In that moment, a simple truth was clear. The call sign Viper 9 commanded authority, trust, and absolute confidence, enough to unify even the most disciplined units under one mission. The aftermath of the mission solidified her reputation. Stories of her leadership, precision, and fearlessness spread quickly through the ranks. Officers who had doubted, SEALs who had only whispered her name in awe, and enlisted personnel who had watched silently, all now understood that she was a force to be reckoned with. Viper 9, however, remained unchanged in demeanor. Calm, composed, and measured, she returned to her quarters, reviewed the mission logs, and prepared for the next operation. The thrill of victory was secondary to her focus on duty. Her dedication, her skill, and her unshakable resolve were what had earned the respect of the most elite warriors on the base. By the time the sun set over the airbase, casting long shadows over hangars and runways, the story of the morning had already become legend. The Admiral, reflecting quietly in his office, realized that leadership was not just about command. It was about recognizing talent, trusting it, and learning when to step back.
And he knew that he had witnessed something he would never forget. A single operative, a single call sign, who had silenced a room, commanded the respect of elite forces, and redefined what it meant to lead in the modern military. As the lights dimmed across the base and the hum of machinery slowed, one fact remained indisputable. Viper 9 was not just a pilot. She was a symbol of skill, precision, and courage. And in every corner of the base, from hangars to command centers, from SEAL teams to officers' offices, her legend had begun, etched not in paper, but in respect, in awe, and in the silent acknowledgement that she was truly exceptional. And so the story of the Admiral who nearly threw her off base ended not with humiliation, but with a lesson for all. Underestimate her at your peril. The salutes, the respect, the legacy. It all began with a simple call sign and a woman who was more than anyone could have anticipated.